Today's session is on preparing unit profiles. So we're gonna, and I'm just gonna work through a PowerPoint session here. So, there we go. So we're gonna look at unit profiles at CQU. Certainly the different types of profiles we've got, and it may sound strange because they've all got the same information. Sections that you actually have control over as a unit coordinator when you're preparing these, when they're saying you need to do your unit profile task. What a unit reviewer will be looking at, because all our profiles go to a reviewer before being finalised, and then who you can contact for help. So the unit profiles at CQU are automated from information that's been put into unit change proposals or new unit proposals, the annual unit enhancement reports. So they're the reports that are done at the end of each term or end of the primary term. So once a year, it's annual for all units. So there's some sections in there which are brought into the unit profile. And the two particulars, the main section is where we address the feedback that students have given us out of the previous term, and then that's put in for students in the next term to show that we're closing the loop around feedback and taking on board what they've said. So both of those are stored in AIMS. So all the data then from AIMS gets pulled into a unit profile. Hopefully that makes sense. So let's looking at them for a bit more. We've got a front section and a back section. So the front section is made available 8 weeks before term starts, and then the back section is made available to students 3 weeks before term starts. So the front section is the bit that's completed automatically. The back section is the bit that you have in control, in your control. So I've got a list of the sections there. We won't talk too much about those. You probably will have already been asked to do your things around textbook and referencing styles. That's a task in AIMS that should have been done by now, I suppose. But that's the only thing that's sort of done. It's automatically added to the profile, but they're the only two things that are sort of a separate task that you have to do. And then the back section is any term-specific information, the schedule and the assessment tasks. So looking at the types of profiles. So generally each profile looks almost pretty well exactly the same sections, just slight variations in the information that's under each section. But we do have, depending on what discipline you're teaching into, there are some slight differences between them. So we've got a standard one, which you would see as basically the 12 weeks, lectures, assessments, those sorts of things. Stuff that's, the next one would be work integrated learning. So there's a big push through that with the university. So those unit profiles may have more information about requirements and being prepared for work integrated learning, anything they may need by way of cards or registrations or licenses or anything, those sorts of things. That extra information needs to go into your unit profile. The clinical practice, very similar to the work integrated learning, but all your health ones around the clinical practice, so your nursing, your occupational therapists, your physios, your psychologies, all of them, again, will have some requirement around health. So there may be a need for vaccinations, health checks if it's education, or working with children. You may need to have that card. So there are some slight differences from the standard one. And then we've got those combination of a standard and some work integrated, or a standard and a clinical practice, where part of the term maybe you're just working through your standard content, say to week 6, and then the second half of the term, they're all out on clinical practice or all out in work integrated learning in an internship or something else. So there's those different types, and they mean you need to make sure you've included certain information. So it's, if you're in a unit, if you're working with a unit that does have clinical practice or work integrated learning attached to it, make sure you do talk to your heads of course, or your head of course, or your deputy dean learning teaching. Make sure you have included the most important information that we need to make the students aware of. The unit profile, although not technically a legal document, is the closest we have as a contract with the students around what we're going to be providing them and what they need to be doing as part of the term. So we do need to make sure we give them all the information they need to have, because if they came back and appeal on something and said you didn't have that in the unit profile, their appeal will be upheld. So then it's about making sure we have all the bits and pieces in there that we can foreseeably need in preparing them for work integrated learning and clinical practices if they're heading out. So do talk to your heads of course and your deputy deans around that. All right, next slide. So I'm going to jump to the information that, before I do this, is there any questions? No? This all makes sense, which is good. So I'll jump to the sections that you as a unit coordinator have control over. So there's one called term-specific information. So that's information that you may include that's specific to the term of offer. It may not be there for all of them, but it may be there for this term. So things like, you know of a conference that's coming up. So you might give them the heads up that a conference is coming. Those sorts of things that it's really specific to the term. It's not always used, so they don't feel that you have to use it. It's not always used. And as you can see, I've got 3 examples there. They're used in slightly different ways. So the first one's from one of the business units, and the coordinators just put in that summary around the assessments. So it's stuff that is relevant for the student to know, but it's not always represented well in the assessment area when we get to it. So it's just a quick summary there of assessment 1 includes 4 quizzes. The assessment 2 is an essay, but it's highlighted that it's an individual essay. And then assessment 3 again is something which they would do as a case study, but it's an individual case study as opposed to being a group one. So that person's just provided that bit of information. Some unit coordinators add a little bit extra information around contacting them. The unit profile does have a contact area for the unit coordinator, but it only includes the email address. So if you want them to have a phone number access to you, want to highlight that you are available by phone as well as email, you'd have to add those extra bits of contact details in the term specific area. And then this other one over to the left is one of our enabling courses, particularly aimed at Indigenous students. So the coordinator's got the contact details and just summarising how the things that they're going to come across, making it really, really clear for the Indigenous students around, okay, you're going to have 10 to 12 hours of study per week. And yes, that's in other places, but she's just condensed it into a form which works for her students. Any questions on that section? No, it's reasonably easy to understand, that one. The schedule. In general, it's set up by weeks, and it's got the modules, the / topics, the readings, and the events and the events and submissions / topic. So it depends on how you've set up your unit, of course. So that top square has the module. They've put the title, so it's chapter 2 of the text, so it's brain power. Where they've got the chapter, it's a discussion, and then the events and submission topics is empty, and you may not have anything in those. What generally will go into that events and submissions topic area is when assessment items are due, or when formative quizzes are due or discussion forum entries are due. So some of those due things are mostly what goes in there. So this other one again is set in weeks, but it's actually got a topic or for the week. So it's the evolving / strategic role of human resource management. The students will be reading chapter 4 of the text, and the events and submissions. So they got 3 discussion questions and a case study. So that's sort of what they're doing, and they've got an online quiz which closes on that date. So it just provides a bit around when things are due. Okay, assessment details.
Sorry.
Yep, go on.
Like in this, like what type, like how deep in details we have to put in this, like assessment, this schedule part, like how deep we have to go? Because I can see different unit profiles with different like amount of information provided.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be too deep. It just needs to be informative as to what's happening each week. Again, context will depend on what you're teaching into, the discipline, the topic. It will vary across disciplines. There may be some more detail you may have in the health and clinical ones, which may not necessarily need to be in say, something as simple as a human resource management unit. But it doesn't have to be overloaded with detail. It just needs to be informative.
Okay, so there's no like specific kind of information.
No.
Okay. But it's preferable if you put the deadlines, if this week like meets a deadline for a quiz or a assessment or assignment. Something.
Yeah, it just provides that 1 page of information around when all my assessment items are due. So some of that stuff does automatically input into there. So once you've set up your assessments towards the end and you've got due dates there, it will automatically populate into that area. So just be a little mindful that it will do that. But yeah, there's no set information, and it just changes depending on discipline, topic, and who's coordinating. Some people put more information in than others, but there's no set information. But you don't want it to turn into a 10-page document just for the schedule. So it's about keeping it concise and informative, with enough information but not too much, because all that detailed information should be in your Moodle site. Does that help? Excellent. Thank you. So moving on to probably the main section which you have control over is the assessment tasks. So there is some required detail. So in saying that you have control over the assessment tasks, there are some things you will not be able to change because it has been set up or has been part of a unit change proposal. So your assessment type and your assessment weightings, you cannot change. You have to stay within that frame of what's in there. You won't be able to change them in the profile anyway. So you have to keep them at that. If you want to change the combinations of weightings or the type of the assessments, you'll need to do a unit change proposal. So if you've got some concerns, and there are, again, due dates as to when they can be done, how far ahead they have to be done before the start of term. So there are due dates and things around that. So if you find that the challenge in how you're setting it up and the need for the change, go talk to your head of course. They will know the dates, the changes and all that sort of stuff and be able to guide you through that process. So the assessment title, the task description, the weighting, the conditions, the submission, due dates, return dates, the assessment criteria, so the marking criteria, the referencing style is automatically populated, the learning outcomes are also automatically populated. So some of the stuff in this area does automatically populate, so you don't have to worry too much about those, but the other areas are areas where you will have some input, will have input, excuse me. So the title, obviously thing and assessment title. So for example, the item title or the assessment question to be answered. So it's something that's meaningful for the students as to what they're doing. So you could put report but you could, if you instead put it as a evaluate assessment design strategy is more meaningful than just report. So think a little bit about what you do title it. Hopefully it's descriptive for the students so that they can actually, they've got a description there, yes, but it's something that they can see has meaning for them than just a report. So the description, it's contains the fundamental information about the assessment, which might include some background to the topic or the title, the requirements in terms of lengths, the layout, font sizes, those sorts of things, particularly for first years, until they get used to the idea of this is what the standard is in this discipline or in this course. So you're providing all of that sort of background information. The challenge is making it clear so that students actually understand what you've written, because some of that's some of the key, definitely a lot of the comments we get back out of feedback is it wasn't clear what I had to do. So do think about how you write it up and make it clear for students, that they know what they have to do, what they're aiming for, what they have to do, and what they have to produce. So that's part of that task description. Due dates, best entered using the calendar function. So there is a calendar function where you can click the calendar and you can find the date, that sort of stuff. So why that's important and why we say that is because that information is then brought into the assessment extension system. So it helps working out how many days extra on top of. So if a student asks for 14 days extension on their assessment, if the due date's already there and it automatically calculates the 14 days extra, well, it will give you an automated date of the proposed new due date if you decide to approve that extension request. So sidetracking here, extensions, students, there is an assessment extension system which the students have to work through. So as a unit coordinator, you can approve anything up to 14 days extension, so 2 weeks past the due date. Anything longer than that, so above 14, will need to go to the Deputy Dean Learning and Teaching for approval. So you will be informed when a student does request something that's longer than the 14 days, so you will sort of be kept in the loop, but you won't be able to approve that. Ideally, the Deputy Dean Learning and Teaching will get back to you and just talk to you about what's going on.
Sorry, if this, you mean the approval request is more than 14 days or after 14 days from the deadline?
No, more than 14 days from the deadline.
Okay.
So if they want 3 weeks extension, which is 21 days, that request would go to your Deputy Dean Learning and Teaching, and they would be the ones that make the determination whether to grant that full 21 days or reduce it back. But ideally, they should be talking with you, the unit coordinator, around that.
Sorry, Sherry, about the calendar, like if you are rolling over from the previous term, your assessment will be having the same dates, right? So you need to change the timing for the assessment. And you're mentioning something about the calendar. Is it like from the same unit profile, or you have to go and turn the editing on and then change the date?
No.
Okay.
There's no, in AIMS, this is done in AIMS. So it's just working your way through the form. I haven't got one that I can work through with you here. So it's just working your way through the different pages in AIMS, and there'll be a calendar function to allow you to drop it down. So this is just for the unit profile. But when you set up your Moodle site for each new term, yes, you do have to go in and check the due dates, because they will roll over with last year's. Unless it's working by week, it may have last year's date, but you do have to do your due diligence and go back into Moodle and double check that your dates are correct for this year. Because even if it's the 27th of February, the 27th of February last year may have been a Friday. The 27th of February this year will be a different day. So you do always have to go back into Moodle and double check your dates, that it all matches with your unit profile. It doesn't link into setting them up in Moodle. There's no automatic connection between the unit profile and Moodle by way of dates. So there is a colour function, and I have sidetracked with the assessment extension stuff, but that was just to provide you a little bit of background. The return date to students. Yes.
For these 14 days extension, do we need to ask the student to provide an evidence of any problem, or it's just...
Okay. The system asks the students to provide evidence to support the request, whether that be a medical certificate. There could be, there's extenuating circumstances. Check the policy as to exactly what they are, but certainly medical certificate, death in the family, you'd need some form of written stuff coming back out of that, whether it's the notification in the paper or whatever, but they do have to provide evidence when they make the request.
Yep. Usually the students send an email that my internet connection was disrupted last night, so I need 1 day extension. Can I have that? So under these circumstances, what we need to do?
Look, and you didn't hear it from me, people will know their students. They will know their circumstances. They may decide to have a little, sort of give that little bit of leeway for a student who has shown themselves to, say, be really dedicated, really on top of it. And you know that the internet access is a problem in the rural or regional area where they are.
Yeah.
You may say, yes, well, that's fine, get it to me tomorrow. And this is individual for each staff member, but it's not something it's not something we encourage happening. But you know your students. But ideally, if it's a 1 day thing, or the assessment's due Friday and they've requested Monday, hey, look, that's up to you. But moving further through, I can't talk to Kendall. Sorry, and let me finish my sentence. Ideally, it's getting them to do assessment extension request. Sharon.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sharon.
Sorry for interrupting. But the way I get around that, for what it's worth, and I just thought I might throw it in there, Sheree, because I get those requests. Is it Ziad? The way I get around it is, would you be prepared to stand up in a meeting when the student goes to appeals because you were being inequitable? So essentially, for 1 day or the weekend, I'm a bit naughty too, and you just go like this. And if they're prepared to write a letter and say, my internet failed, and they are prepared to go, it's actually quite a long-winded thing to put in an extension request. If they're prepared to spend the 20 minutes, half an hour to do that for a day, it's not worth your arguing the point on it, if you know what I mean.
Yep. Thank you, Sharon. The other thing that you could be thinking about too is if you've got something due on a Friday, think about making it due at 9 a.m. in the morning on a Monday. Instead of 5 o'clock Friday afternoon, make it 9 o'clock Monday morning. Because unless you are really, really dedicated yourself, you're not likely to be marking over the weekend as they come in. You wouldn't touch them till Monday anyway. So if you just make it that first thing open of business on the Monday morning, if they've got a weekend, they don't really need to ask for that extra day. Or
that's a very good suggestion.
So yeah, there's ways around this. You just, just give them the weekend anyway and make it Monday. What's 2 days when they're not business days? All right, return dates. Sorry, getting sidetracked back to where we were. Return dates to students. So we have to provide them a date when we will return the marked work. Generally, it's about 2 weeks turnaround time for marking. So that's the general time frame. But if you've got a really small class of, say, 30 students, you might be able to turn it around in a week. If you've got a larger course, a larger unit of, say, 500 students, you've got to feed in, you've got to make sure you've got your marking team, you've got a marking team, you've got to make sure you've done your moderation exercises, those sorts of things. It may have to stretch to 3 weeks, depending on the context of how many words, how big the assessment item is, the length of time it takes to mark, and working with your team to fit moderation in. But generally, it's about 2 weeks, so 14 days from submission to return. All right, moving on. Assessment tasks, the assessment criteria. So explain the aspects of the task that will be assessed. So we're looking at your marking criteria here. So it may not, generally it's just a list of the things that you will be marking on. So if you've got a rubric, you might just put in some of those sorts of comments in there. But it's just generally, what are the things that you're going to be targeting when you're marking? You can put the breakdown of the marks if you want to, but most people don't. So it's just a simple list of what you're going to be marking on, and it's sort of generally the criteria that you're marking against. Any rubrics or those sorts of things will go into Moodle, and they'll be able to access them there. Any conditions, minimum marks required for the assessment items. So for the sakes of example, aviation, they set the pass mark for a multiple choice quiz at 75% because that's the industry standard. That's what CASA expect. So it's about working out what your minimum mark is. Normally, most people don't have conditions. The minimum mark undertaken to be 50% or higher is a pass. But if you've got some minimum mark requirements, you need to identify those conditions so students know they're there. Submitting, so submitting is typically online via Moodle. There's very few, I think there may not even be any exceptions to that rule. Things I can think of maybe are some form of 3D design object that you've had to create, or the students had to create a painting or whatever, but in our current environment, even if they do that, you can always get them to submit the photos of the object taken from various things. So typically it's online, except for, say, extenuating circumstances like that. And yeah, you'll be able to be guided from when it was last offered as to what the general standard is for your units, and certainly within the school, to talk to your heads, of course, and do the L&Ts around if there's anything that you want them not to be submitting online. They will know the expectations there and what things could be fitting into that category. So what's automatically, I'm changing focus here. Yep, because I'm changing topic very soon. So this last little bit around the assessment tasks that are automatically populated, so the weighting, the percentage of the contribution of the assessment to the overall mark, whether that's 30 out of 100, so 30%, 40%, what's that, 70, another 30%, however that is, you can't change those percentage weightings. The referencing style and the learning outcomes, though the referencing style you've set up before in the textbook task, and the learning outcomes are part of the unit proposal, the last change proposal, a new unit proposal, as is the weightings. So if you need to change the weightings, all the learning outcomes, that will require a unit change proposal. All right, any other questions in that section before I move on? We're almost finished. No questions? Excellent. So we'll keep moving on. As I mentioned before, each unit profile goes to a reviewer for a double check before being released to students. Some of that is to make sure that students are very good at picking us up on our poor spelling and our poor grammar. So some of it is to make sure they can't do that. But there are some other things that a reviewer is looking for. So you should be able to see who your reviewer is in AIMS. Down the left is a workflow. So you should be able to see who the reviewer is. So once you say it's ready, it'll go off to the reviewer and they will be looking for certain things. And it is likely you could be a reviewer for somebody else's unit profile. So taking notice of what I say now will probably be helpful for you as well. So the checklist, they've got some checklist questions. I think there's about 9 all up. that they've got to tick off and say yes, 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 yes to before it can go back to you for approval, for the final tick to say yes, ready to make it available. So they're looking at the schedule. Is it written in a clear and concise way? Are the due dates for assessment items correct throughout the profile? So if you've got, there's two areas where you can have assessment dates, in the assessment area and then in the schedule. Do those match? So we're looking for that consistency. Are all the unit study commitments for students clearly explained? So is it easy for somebody else to pick up and read and really understand what the students have to do, or what they, if they were a student, would have to do? So is everything clearly explained? Is the spelling and grammar correct? Do all the assessment tasks clearly align with the learning outcomes? So whatever your learning outcomes, if they have to demonstrate an oral skills, is that learning outcome matched with an oral presentation? So you're really looking at making sure they clearly align to each other, and that the assessment task is actually providing, the task that you set is providing evidence that the students can do those learning outcomes. All right, question 6. Are the assessment criteria clearly defined for each assessment task? Are the student expectations described for each assessment task? So do the students really, have you described for the students what they're doing and what they need to include? So things like 12-point font, Times New Roman, font size, 12-point font type, Times New Roman, those things, we may think of them as pretty basic, but if we really want students to know exactly what we're after, sometimes you may need to go to that detail. If you don't care about that and you're happy to get it in whatever form, well, you may not necessarily need to include that. But they do ask those questions. So yeah, is the expectations of what the students have to do clearly described for each assessment task? Are the student feedback mechanisms appropriate and timely? So they're going to be back within 14 days or whatever the time frame is. Is that timely for the type of task that's being marked? And then they have the option for additional comments and suggestions. So they can also highlight areas which need, in going through it, you say, oh, you've got this statement here, that's last year's date, because they can't edit it. They will feed that back to you. So if they spot a date or whatever, they'll provide some feedback and kick it back to you, and then it'll go back to them, then back to you and approval. So there is a fairly rigorous, generally rigorous review process here, making sure that they are all correct before they go out. Any questions on that?
Excuse me, Sherry.
Yeah.
If you've submitted your proposal to the reviewer and then after he accepted it, can you do any edit and then send him back?
You should be able to. If it goes straight back to you, you can do a final edit on bits and pieces. I think you can send it back.
Okay, so once you are doing any edit after acceptance or approval, you need to send it back to the reviewer again. Is that what I mean?
It's likely it will have to go back, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And Sherry, need for the improvement is provided under the additional comments. So if you want to give, yeah.
Yeah, it can go in the additional comments, but there's also another area there as well. So it just depends on which area they put it in. All right, 3 slides to go. Where can you get help? So certainly external to your school, our Learning and Teaching Services StaffNet site, anything around referencing, so referencing styles, what the university accepts or does support. There are, I think there's 5 of those. There's the link there to referencing guides for students. We've got some documents that write 10 top tips for writing and using assessment criteria. What else we got? There's some videos there that you can watch. There's a document around deterring plagiarism. So I've included that because we've had some contract cheating cases recently. So we need to be thinking about our assessment item in the context of not just plagiarism, and certainly we don't want students to plagiarise, but contract cheating. So if you've not come across that before, students pay somewhere else to write their assessment item for them. So it's about identifying, thinking about what you can be assessing students for, not just the content of what they're reporting back. You may get them to identify the process that they've taken. You may get them to do a reflection on a task which they had to do. It's about thinking a little bit laterally, I suppose, to try get them to realise that it's not just a document that's going in that can be written by somebody else. They've actually got to do some work themselves. So there is some a document there around deterring plagiarism. And then other things that we've got great guides for writing learning outcomes, 10 top tips for writing learning outcomes. There's all the graduate attributes, the great guides for internationalisation and indigenisation. And of course, Bloom's taxonomy is a very handy tool that we have available to us as well. All right, so they're all the spots external to your school. Within your school, certainly there's the Deputy Dean Learning and Teaching, your heads of course, your colleagues who may have been here longer in time frame than maybe you. So there'll be lots of help within the school to help you through this process as well.
Sherry, can I just ask a quick question?
Yes.
Those external links that you have there, where are they currently? Are they in the Learning and Teaching?
These ones, the StaffNet. I'll send you guys the slides.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sherry, can I ask a question?
Yes.
So, as a unit reviewer, can I see the name of the unit coordinator in the AIMS?
You should be able to, yes.
So
if it's not in AIMS, it'll be in the profile under teaching contacts.
Where I can find that?
All right, so are you in AIMS now?
Yeah.
All right, down the left, can you see a workflow?
On the left. So it's.
So I'm guessing you should be able to see the workflow of where it started, the unit coordinator, who it's gone to.
Actually, it's written in front of everyone. Who's the unit coordinator, who's the reviewer, and then so it's written by name as well.
Yeah. So it could be that it might be a little bit hidden to you, Imran.
I cannot see anything.
That's all right.
Just say review e-profile, e-unit profile, and then in the front of that is the due date.
All right. So you need to click on that task.
Okay. If I click on that task, it opens up another window and workflow. Yeah, workflow approval process. Create Jan Lewis. Okay. So the person who created is the unit coordinator.
Yes.
Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And as a unit coordinator, I can also see, can I see, the unit reviewer's name?
Yes, it should be there in the workflow.
Okay, again in the workflow. Okay.
Sherry, can I just ask another question about that screen? Because I'm casual and my contract doesn't start until 2 weeks before the term, my supervisor is on there as well and there's an asterisk beside her name. What does that mean? Is she the one that's supposed to be doing the unit profile? Because I got the AIMS task, but I'm assuming she did as well.
I'm not sure, Leanne. I can't tell you.
Yeah, she's on leave till the 11th of February and not available by email.
Well, she could have delegated the task to you.
Well, she has. She's told me to go ahead and do everything.
Yeah, but in AIMS, she's possibly delegated it to you.
Yeah.
But
I just wondered
her name there as
okay.
the key person for now.
All right, because the reviewer has this asterisk beside it as well, and her name in both the create and the whatever the third category is. So I thought, does that mean that they've starred that she should be doing it?
I think it's because I'm not entirely sure. I'm suspecting that it's because the task has been delegated out.
Mine is the same, except it has asterisk beside everyone, including my name. So I don't know if that.
Well, I guess
I
I
don't know.
started doing them. I guess I can just push the submit button, and if they go through, they go through.
Yep. If you've got them done, yep, just push it off to the next level. You'll find out where it goes
Okay.
eventually. No,
I'm assuming
the
if
stores
I-
will make
if I
sure it's
got
all
the
done in
AIMS
time.
If I get the AIMS email telling me to do it, I should be doing it.
Actually,
That happened last term. Like, I didn't get appointed until after, and then I got in trouble for not doing something, and I wasn't even on the list at that point.
sorry, Ash, can I comment on this? As
Yeah,
long as Leanne, as long as you are able to see the Unity profile and you can edit something, this means that you are responsible for this as well, either by being delegated or as a unit coordinator.
All right, thanks.
Thanks.
I just
Yeah.
didn't want to do the wrong thing.
Oh, there'll be plenty of help around to be able to ask questions.
Oh, it's difficult for me because I work from home, so there's no one around me.
All right, just reach out to the Ed Devs. They'll give you a hand. The Educational Developer team. So that's myself, Nadine Adams, Mari Foreman, and we've got a couple of new members as well. But the 3 ones have been around for a while. I'll really be able to help you. It'll be myself, Nadine, or Mari. All right, so that's help and the resources, and that's all I have. So let me just stop the share. And so I can go back and see everybody. So I will send you the PowerPoint presentations.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm just writing down a name at the same time. And if you have any questions after the session, just contact me. More than happy to answer those questions at that time. And yeah, so for now, is there any more questions from anyone? No? Excellent. All right, I will give you back about 15 minutes of your day. Enjoy your lunches. And I might actually be able to get some work done now my computer's working again. Thank you, everyone, for coming.
Thanks.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.